Hi, my name is Alex Dolphin and welcome back to another episode of Ex Ante. Today we're going to discuss the case In Re Banks. This case was heard in the Supreme Court of North Carolina in the year of 1978. Let's go ahead and jump into the facts of the case. So the petitioner is a man that was being prosecuted for his violation of a Peeping Tom statute. This statute was passed by the North Carolina legislature, and what it did was basically criminalize Peeping Tom behavior. If you don't know what a Peeping Tom is, it's a man who goes around and looks into the rooms of females, spies on them, for instance. It's kind of disgusting or reprehensible behavior, and so the legislature sought to criminalize it when they passed this Peeping Tom statute. The man that is being prosecuted for his Peeping Tom behavior argues that the statute on the books is too vague for it to be constitutionally valid, and because it's too vague, he can't be on the hook for criminal behavior. Basically, what he's arguing is that the statute would criminalize behavior that's totally normal and totally legal. A couple examples that he gives is a construction worker that looks into the room of a female on accident and sees her. He says that that would be criminalized by the statute, and there's nothing really wrong there. He also says that maybe a neighbor that happens to glance into the room of a female just by happenstance, he would be criminalized by the statute. And because it is so broad, the Supreme Court of North Carolina, he argues, should strike it down. So before them is a case where the Supreme Court of North Carolina has to decide if this statute is too broad to be enforceable. The North Carolina legislature says to determine this, they need to look to the legislative history of this statute. And when they do so, they see that the legislature was expressly trying to prohibit Peeping Tom-like behavior. So they weren't trying to limit behavior of, the construction worker or a neighbor that's glancing in. And they say that it's very clear that the legislature was trying to do this because of the legislature's use of the word secretly in the statute. And I'll just read that briefly. It says, any person who shall peep secretly into any room. So the court places a lot of emphasis on this secret word, right? Because it's not necessarily secret for a construction worker who walks by or a neighbor who glances in that they're doing any type of illegal behavior. It has to be secret. So the court says that this statute is not too broad to be enforceable, and it's not vague. It actually is constitutionally valid because when we look to the legislative history and when we look to the actual text of the statute, we see that it's very clear what the legislature is trying to penalize here. And the court says that if there is a choice between two interpretations, one that the statute is constitutionally valid and the other that is constitutionally void, the court should always err on the side that the statute is constitutionally valid and take the side of the legislature in saying that that statute is valid. So that's the case. The statute is not too vague to be rendered unconstitutional. And the respondent here, the person who brought this to the Supreme Court, is definitely going to be on the hook for his Peeping Tom behavior, which I think we can all cheer a little bit about. Kind of a creepy guy that does deserve to have some criminal punishment for his behavior. Okay, so let's talk about some ex ante implications from this broad or vague statute interpretation, right? So to do an example that's a little bit more removed from gross Peeping Tom behavior, let's think about a classic example of statutory interpretation, which is a statute that bars vehicles from the park. So a statute that says no vehicles are allowed in the park. Now, if that's all the statute says, and there's no definitions about what's a vehicle, there's going to be some problems that the legislature runs into there and that the court runs into in enforcing that statute, right? Because let's think about an instance where a toddler has an RC vehicle, an RC truck that's in the park. Is he breaking the statute? Well, it's a vehicle, right? Let's think about a case where a handicapped person has a motorized wheelchair. Is that person breaking the statute? Very possible. So we can see that this statute on the books, no vehicles in the park, is too broad, too vague to be enforceable, right? Because it's not clear what a vehicle is. So that's just an example that I wanted to share with you to illustrate the principle that the court is, taking on here, is that a statute can't be too broad that the population can't understand what it means. And if it is too broad that the population can't understand what it means, then it can't be criminally enforceable, right? Because there's not sufficient notice to the population that that activity is actually criminal. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.